Okay. Austria has been hit by an earthquake. The initial seismic event occurred yesterday at 10:13 a.m. local time with a magnitude of 6, 42 kilometers south of here. We're still assessing the needs of the affected communities, and the search and rescue efforts are still ongoing. However, our first estimations would be that 70,000 people roughly are affected, of which 29,000 people are injured, 2,200 people are missing, and 422 people are the only number that tragically we can confirm. Those are the people that are reported to be deceased. We have a massive problem with drinking water in the area, as well as power outages, and we really need you down there to respond to the disaster zone. So I will give you a full briefing over the next hour before you will mobilize. Local emergency response agencies are deployed, but stretched beyond their capacities. This is what I told EU rescue teams from France, Poland, and Romania after they arrived south of Vienna for an earthquake exercise. This was not a real event. We faked it. And I played the role of an exhausted and tired government official who briefed the responding aid coming in from outside of Austria on the situation before they spent 4 days locating victims, breaching concrete slabs, and rescuing casualties in a completely fake situation. I am what they call a disaster manager. Yes, that's actually a job. Our task as disaster managers are to think about what could threaten us as a society and what we could do to mitigate that. When a disaster occurs, we try to make it go away again. This is why you can find us in many public safety institutions such as the military or local councils, ministries, and of course, emergency services. But I do admit we are a rare specimen and we are hardly seen in public. Our natural habitat are unimpressive office buildings where we live behind even more unimpressive desks. And in a crisis, we leave the stage to politicians and high-ranking decision makers. But from time to time, we come out to play. Playing is deeply rooted in civil protection, believe it or not. And this is the reason why over 200 people from several European countries met up south of Vienna to respond to a completely fictional and hypothetical earthquake. To understand this better, I need to explain to you that emergency services operate in two modes. Most of the time, they find themselves in a state of preparedness. We call this the cold state or the cold side. Until they have to respond to an emergency, when they have to switch to the hot mode, the hot side. Now picture this, a bunch of firefighters in the kitchen of their station, having some coffee or being down in the garage, checking the equipment on their trucks, and suddenly the alarm bell rings and they have to go out to a traffic accident because they have to rescue somebody who's trapped inside their vehicle. Within seconds, they are transferred from total relaxation to adrenaline-fueled action. And they don't seem to have a problem with that. They do this every day, several times a day even. So what's their secret? Well, they found a way to cool down the hot side and to warm up while they are still on the cold side waiting for emergencies. And by this, they balance out this temperature difference. And they manage to achieve a temperature on both sides that makes it really easy for them to switch between. And an extraordinary situation becomes suddenly routine or business as usual. Now, some of you maybe think they ended up in a lecture on emergency thermodynamics, and I know you were promised to hear something about play. Let me assure you, this is all about play. Playing is the key to control the temperature. Playing means to imagine scenarios. and how they can take their course. Playing means to try out different options and to see if they feel right for the problem at hand. To be able to understand how a crisis situation unfolds, including its causes and consequences, means to know how to resolve it. And this knowledge can be used to produce tactics, to pick equipment, or to create training materials for emergency responders. All this goes into checklists, plans, but also how a fire truck looks like, how much water it has on board, what kind of equipment it has on board. To have all these things beforehand means to have that available while you are on the hot side. This takes off the stress and cools it down. But just because emergency responders developed a bunch of checklists, that doesn't mean that they wait for something to happen. They train, they test their abilities, and they learn. They fight fake fires, they treat fake patients, they arrest fake criminals. Playing is essential for any emergency responder, for any firefighter, for any paramedic, for any police officer, for any nurse, for any soldier, for any corporate chief information security officer. Playing is what makes these people essentially ready. But why would that be useful to you if you're not an emergency responder? Well, when kids play, they don't do it just for the fun of it. They do it to understand their surrounding. They do it to understand our world. They take unfamiliar perspectives and they jump into different roles and they see what they wouldn't be able to do in real life or what they couldn't do in real life. And they learn something about the consequences, and this makes them resilient. As grown-ups, we need this resilience. We can use this resilience because we live in a very uncertain world. And so we can take unfamiliar perspectives and we can jump into different roles. We can think about how we would act in a certain scenario. We can use our fantasy to think the unthinkable, and we can analyze complex systems, dependencies, their flaws and their weak spots. And by doing this, we can learn something about ourselves and about the risks we face. Playing can take many different shapes. And to just show you one of them, I'd like to take you on a little journey to Berlin, to Charlottenburg Castle. There you can find this piece of furniture. What you see in front of you is a dresser that belonged to King Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia in the 19th century. And the content is not clothing, it's different wooden tiles in many shapes and colors. And the content as a whole is called the Kriegsspiel, a war game, which was developed by a high-ranking army officer called Georg Leopold von Reiswitz, who understood something very important. There is a certain power to play, a power that is so strong that it can win battles. Now, I argue we can harness this power to make individuals, whole organizations, or even whole communities more resilient. And we can do that by doing three things, or using three different settings: planning, training, and exercising. Now let's start with planning. Well, my favorite way to plan with playful methods in the context of crisis management is to use Lego bricks. By doing that, we can externalize the ideas we have in our head, and we can make them visible for others. We can discuss certain situations and how we see them, and we can strategize together. To give you just an example, one of the most important things in crisis management is the aspect of risk management. To understand what's coming your way, to understand what you actually prepare for, means to know how to be ready for it. And We can do that by discussing risk. I could tell you in theory that risk is a product of impact and likelihood, and we can talk back and forth about how you would understand a certain risk. When I say flood, how you would understand a flood and how I would understand a flood. I could imagine 1,000 affected people, you could imagine 100 affected people, I could imagine a river, you could imagine a whole system of rivers that's flooded. Or we can actually build that risk. We can make something very abstract, something like risk, tangible. Now, the second and the third use case are training and exercising, which are completely different things in crisis management. Training means to transfer knowledge and to build skills. And by applying playful methods, we can increase participant engagement in training. We can therefore create a better learning experience and receive better enabled personnel, more capable responders, more prepared communities. Exercising puts these skills to the test. Exercising means to come up with experiments that are designed to find out whether training was successful, staff is capable, equipment is up for the test, and the whole plan that we came up with actually works or not. Now, von Reiswitz did this in a very special way. He put figurines on a mock battlefield on a desktop. Dice rolls decided whether an order was carried out successfully to create an element of uncertainty, or whether a cavalry unit stays in formation after they charge down a hill. And this was a concept that was totally new back in the days, and it was so successful, it was so well received that young Prussian officers, they played the whole night through. And elements of those games, elements of this Kriegsspiel, they were developed further, and they ended up to be something that we know today as tabletop role-playing games, or role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer. As I said, a culture of play is deeply rooted in crisis management, and it helps us to prototype and to innovate, to learn and to come up with solutions for very complex problems. It helps us to achieve mission success when we find ourselves on the hot side and have to perform under critical situations. It helps us to cool down, and it helps us to warm up. Now, in a world where we have pandemics, cyber threats, a divided political climate, and war raging not far away, I'd argue play is a skill that is worth having. And the great thing about it is that we are gifted with it naturally since childhood. Thank you.